What up? All right, this light is like right on me. All right, so if you're here, say hey. Tell me how you're doing, 0 through 5. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out why this light is so bright. Hey Jasper, this is a small group today. Only 4 of you guys in here. Oh, it's fine. You're probably just writing one just to like, you know. Hi Grace. Hi Josie. Who else is here? It says there's 4 people in here. When I came in 2 minutes ago, there was no one, so I just sent out an email. Do you think a lot of people just sort of wait for the replays? Just out of curiosity. Like, do you guys prefer to be here live? Or do you think a lot of people are just like, whatever, I'll watch the replay? Whoops. One other question for you guys. I know. One other question, and the 3 or 4 of you can answer this. When you have a question about APUSH, when there's something you want to know, or whether it's content or about the essays or the test, do you go to Google to type in and try to find the answer, or do you go to YouTube? Which one do you go to find answers for APUSH or for any AP class? Google. Good to know. All right, I'm trying to figure out where AP students are, All right, so this is good. So I got period 6 ready to go for you. Yeah, so we're 13 days away. Yeah, the stress is definitely there. But we're gonna keep going. We'll definitely finish all the time periods. I'm gonna do a bonus session this week. I'll send out an email about that. It's gonna be something that's open for everyone to try to like get more students in. But it'll probably be like something like a SAQ breakdown or something like that to just sort of like help again with a skill, and we'll attach content to it. Cool. All right, so let's do this. So, take notes as usual, ask questions on everything. Tomorrow we're going to be doing period 6 DBQ. So that will be really useful to go through all of that. And then next weekend, we kind of start the exam week crunch time. So I'm pretty much live for you guys every night starting on Saturday until test day. All right, so just so that you know. So you'll have this week, you'll see me tomorrow, and then there'll be 1 or maybe 2 bonus sessions this week, and then we'll be live every night from May 5th on. Okay, so, and then also just, keep in mind you can be referring friends and using your link. You should have gotten an email already with your specific link. And if any of your friends sign up, 15% of it goes right back to you. So you get some money on this. So, keep that in mind too. All right, you guys ready for period 6? Drop a 6 in the chat if you're ready for period 6. 6. Word. 5. All right, let's do this. So period 6 is basically the Gilded Age. It's about industrialization. And then it's also the big piece of it in the middle is migration. So I'm going to take you through it. I've got a whole thing. I think maybe I didn't put this slide at the beginning and end. I'll come back to this slide at the end. So the general period 6 is 6 less content than other periods. It's really not that much. I don't think it's that bad. I think it's easier than some of the other time periods. Definitely less than 7. 7 is crazy. All right. So period 6, more concepts. I don't know. I think it's not that bad. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, I can definitely see that. There's definitely like some big concepts in this time period. Okay, so basically the general idea of period 6, we've got big industrialization, big business that's starting. So some of those like big guys like Vanderbilt, Carnegie, Rockefeller, and then they are using like aggressive financial methods, and that's going to lead to some economic downturns. Because of the big business, farmers and unions are organizing more. They're trying to get better, rights for workers, better hours, better conditions. So those are like the 2 big business things. And then migrations are increasing both within the U.S. We have a movement west and north from the south. And then there's also a lot of immigrants coming in from new places, from Eastern Europe, from Asia, whereas before it was more Western Europe. And then finally, there's just like a continued, like the Gilded Age in general changes the culture a bit, and has brought up a few new ideas in terms of like justifying the wealth that people are getting, and then also coming up with plans for the future of like how to deal with the class disparity that's really happening between like rich and poor. So, okay, so jumping in. All right, so in this time, there is just a lot of production happening, and that is leading to a huge, like a lot of development within the economy and the consolidation of businesses. So that's like trusts and different things. Some of the ways in which the government was kind of supporting that expansion is subsidies for transportation and communication. So the government itself is a part of the development within those two industries. So for example, the transatlantic telegraph, this was built in this time period, and it was basically like cables put like the bottom of the ocean. How they actually do this, I have no idea. This is sort of like something that just kind of blows my mind, but it cuts down. So it used to take 10 days to get a message from the US to Europe or vice versa. And because of this, it only took minutes. So it cuts down communication times like immensely. I mean, just think about it. Like here I am talking to you guys and, like you're all around the world. And so just like improving our communication times is huge. And so that's a big change in this time period. Second, we're going to see a lot of new technological developments, and so there's like several reasons here. So more business will happen because of better technology that can produce more things faster. Plus, there's more access to natural resources. Some of that has to do with like things like imperialism, getting actual access to the resources, or moving west and getting more access to resources. And then there's also new financial systems. So ways in which we can bank and deal with money, and better marketing so we can actually get the word out there about different products. Things like, I'm not sure exactly what year this started, but the catalogs they would send out to people, that is like, that's going to drive more business, and just a bigger labor force because of migration. There's just more people to work. And so, like we had mentioned, some of the here's like 4 names that you should for sure know, and you should, if you can connect their industry, that's even better. So Rockefeller is the oil industry, JP Morgan is banking, Carnegie would be steel, and Vanderbilt is the railroads. And so those are like 4 big like tycoons of this time period that are really driving a lot of the industry that's happening. So 2 of the main concepts in this have to do with horizontal versus vertical integration. And it's just, these are kind of economic concepts, but it's worth noting here because of the difference between Rockefeller and Carnegie. I always have trouble totally remembering which one was which. I believe that it was, which one was oil? Carnegie. No, Rockefeller is oil, so Rockefeller is horizontal, and Carnegie was vertical. Yeah. Okay, so just to like clarify, horizontal integration is when you gain control of everyone else in the same industry as you. So you can see the US oil company in this picture, and they would gain control of all these other oil refineries. So they have a complete monopoly on that. Vertical would be like you gain control of every aspect of production within your industry. So this is talking about meat. And so you would own a cattle farm, you would own the slaughterhouse, you would own railroad cars, you own every single aspect. So you've got complete control over like a whole industry, whereas horizontally you have complete control over one step of the industry. Yeah, exactly. All right, so worth noting the 2 differences with that. I took a class in college that was like an economic history class, and this was all this stuff, and to be honest, I hated it. So this is not my favorite stuff. But this is like the basic principles of economics applies here. So because they were able to produce more stuff, there's more being made, the supply goes up. So, things become cheaper because they're not as rare. So because the supply is up, the prices go down. Okay, so supplies up, prices down. That means that the actual like real wages has to do with what you can actually purchase with the money that you make. So, you can make, whatever they were making, $15 an hour, but I'm just, that's obviously not what they were making. But, if you make $15 an hour, you can only buy so much with that, right? Like in terms of how much does all of our stuff cost. So your real wages is an actual number that shows this is how much you're making, but this is how much you can actually buy with that. And so people were able to access more stuff because the prices weren't as expensive. So there were like opportunities in terms of that. So increased supply led to decreased prices, which increases the real wages. It doesn't mean that the like factories were actually increasing the wages of employees. It just means that the purchasing power of the dollar was further because things were cheaper. I hope that makes sense. So yeah, this is just like a lot of economics. So basically what we're seeing is just like a lot of the consolidation of businesses in order to make more money. So there weren't a lot of rules around this at the beginning. And so you can make a lot of money when you monopolize an industry because you can set the prices at whatever you want. Even think about it now with like things like phone services, your internet. In a lot of ways, these things are monopolized, right? Like the prices of them are sort of set and you can't really, it's hard to kind of combat that because it's only a couple of companies that really own all of that, So like you think about the price of internet, if it was just one company, then we all had to purchase from that one internet company, then they could say the price is whatever they want and we would have to pay it because we want the internet and they're the only ones that provide it. So there's a lot of there's business benefits to creating a trust like that, to monopolizing. And it just like further concentrates the wealth. Like the wealthier just get even more wealthy because of that, because people can't go anywhere else. So they just go to you. So you can set whatever price you want. But when you don't have a monopoly, when you break those things up, then you're kind of beholden to your competitor, right? There's more of a race to the bottom when that happens. So, if you don't, because there are more than one companies that have internet service, you can compare prices and you can choose the one you want. And they know you're going to do that. So they make sure that their prices are comparable to their competitor. And if they're more, they have to offer more features, right? That's a little bit how that works. So in this time period I know it's really conceptual for sure. Is like being able to understand why they would do trusts and why that's a bad thing for consumers, but a good thing for the rich guys. If you have questions, just drop them. So in this time period, we're going to see is like, this is where US really gets in the imperialism game, right? Like imperialism as a whole, like globally, is on the uptick in this time period because of, like even like the Berlin Conference happens in this time period. And so Africa is being divided up. And the US gets involved. They don't get involved in Africa, but they start to take lands. They annex Hawaii, they get Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines is in this time period or right on the edge of this time period. And so with US imperialism comes more access to resources because they're exploiting those lands just like the Europeans are and taking resources from them. But it also means new markets so they can sell products to the people who live there. And they can, with the trust, for example, they end up making those people beholden to their business. So you have to purchase with them. Yeah, the Spanish-American War is in 1898. So it's right at the tip, the turning point of period 6 and period 7. So it would, I'm not sure exactly which one. I don't have it in these slides. So it might just be the beginning of period 7. But it is like part of this. It is how we start to get more lands. And, like Alaska is a big piece of our resources because of that. So these are reasons why big business rises in this time period. So if you get a question about like a causation question about big business, about industrialization, these are reasons why there is such an increase in this time period. Like why now? So, all right. So I have a nice little image for you. I really like this. I don't know if you can totally see. It's a little bit bigger. I don't know if you can totally see all the words on this, but this is a really good political cartoon. It's not just the US, it's also, I think it's Britain. I think this guy is British. But this is all about this is the white man's burden. So if we just like talk about this for a minute, talk about US imperialism, you know, just like I'll kind of explain this out a little bit, and you can, when you notice something, like, you know, drop it in the chat. So you've got Uncle Sam here, right? And then you got this like British dude. And the white man's burden is this idea that it's literally the white man's duty, it's the white man's job to civilize the non-white societies, right? To civilize Africa, to civilize Asia, Latin America. And so you can clearly see like they're in their baskets are their colonies. So on Uncle Sam's basket is Cuba, is the Philippines, is Puerto Rico, the different places that the US colonizes. And the British basket is India, China, because of opium, is Egypt, you know, so you've got all the British colonies in there. And you can see like as they are walking up, all the way on the top is civilization. And they're walking on these stones that are titled. The stones say oppression, barbarism, superstition, ignorance, brutality, vice. It's like they're lifting them up from those evils and bringing them to the like light, right? The civilization light. This is the kind of thing that you could get on this could be in a DBQ, this could be in a multiple choice. Exactly. Yep. So this is showing like the white man's burden is just, that's that idea that America and Britain are doing the like hard work to civilize these other countries. I mean, just look at how they're like, how they are. The US is almost like ragged. He's very like, he looks a little tired, right? It's like, he's exhausted, but it's his job to bring those people up. And everyone in the baskets looks very stereotypical, very like, you know, primal. And that's exactly how it's supposed to be. So this is just like a good political cartoon to kind of show you what people were talking about this time period in terms of white man's burden. It's just kind of crazy. All right. So some of the different like perspectives, like just kind of going into some of the economic stuff. Is it related to Darwinism? Yes. So white man's burden is essentially the same as social Darwinism, where you have to, it's just like, it's the idea that it's intertwined. So the idea with social Darwinism is that there is a hierarchy, that white people are superior to non-white people. And then in the white man's burden, it's like, because the white man is superior, it is the white man's duty to help those that are inferior. So they kind of go together. Is it a cause and effect or just both concepts? Yeah, so they go together. So white man's burden would be an effect of social Darwinism. And both of them are, social Darwinism is a cause of imperialism, but the like increase of it could be, it's kind of hard, could be an effect. Okay, so make sure you are familiar with the term laissez-faire economics. This is what pretty much, this is how you can describe the government policies of this time period, because they were mostly opposed to government intervention. So they were really just like, leave the economy as it is. It will, you know, ebbs and flows will happen, but the government should not get involved. This is based on Adam Smith. This is the invisible hand, right? That like the government should not play a role in government policies. And so another, like, as a result of this time period, you know, labor force is always sort of in conflict with management. There's always a struggle for power there. And it's a struggle because management doesn't want to spend money. Management wants to keep costs as cheap as possible. And unfortunately, cheap things don't lead to good conditions for workers. So the labor force wants to get paid more and wants to work, you know, a reasonable amount of hours in safe working conditions. But management, it costs money to do those things. And so there's a constant struggle. And so there's two different major unions that come out of this time period, the Knights of Labor and the American Federation of Labor. One of them is violent, one of them is not. You guys remember which one is which? I personally like, I had it at one point, Knights of Labor. Do you remember which one was violent, which one was not? One of them was just like okay with violence, and the other one was not quite. I think it was the American. You're probably right that the Knights were okay with using violence and that the American Federation of Labor was not. Anyways, there's a bunch of different strikes that happen. Yeah, there's the Haymarket Square strike. That's this right here, where you had all these people meeting to protest working conditions. Whoops, and someone threw a bomb or something, and the police started firing. So it's just like, the point of synthesis in terms of protests turning violent is like, there's always the same thing, right? It's very similar to like the Boston Massacre. There's a protest, someone throws something, the police start firing, and all hell breaks loose. And in this case, there were several people killed. Exactly. So it's just like unclear. Is it someone that was protesting? Is it someone that's protesting the protest? Is it someone that's just trying to start trouble? Like, it's unclear of who started it, but someone throws a bomb, it explodes, and the police fire back, and people die. And there are several anarchists that are hung because of this. And so it's just a very controversial thing that happens because it's just unclear of who does what and why. So and then some of the other strikes that happen, the Pullman strike, the railway strikes, the homestead strikes, where people are just pissed. Like, big business is not in favor of people. And so people want wages, people want better working conditions, and they'll protest and strike when they need that. Okay, so a couple of differences in terms of the North and the South. So the cities of the North are becoming more and more industrialized. Obviously they had been industrialized before the Civil War, but after the Civil War, they are even more industrialized. This is where the big businesses are located, right? Think of like New York City, of Boston, of Philadelphia. These cities become more and more industrialized. Chicago. A lot of the new migrants that are moving to the U.S. are moving to these cities. And so they're really like, they're characterized by the factories, by the mechanization of labor in there. Whereas the South, there are sort of this like new South. And, now that slavery has ended, they shift to sharecropping, which isn't all that different than slavery. Like, a lot of the slaves stayed on the plantation and became sharecroppers because they don't have anywhere else to go. The difference is with sharecropping is that you can keep some of the crops that you are producing and you can sell those so you can make some money. So obviously sharecropping is better than slavery, but a lot of people didn't have any options. They had to stay there because it costs money to leave the plantation to go elsewhere, and they don't have that. However, a lot of African Americans, and we'll talk about this in 6.2, do leave the South and go to the North. The northern cities really become a hub for people looking for opportunity. So, but the South, this like new South idea is based on sharecropping. All right, so here's a picture of sharecropping. I just Googled sharecropping. It's kind of creepy that they're just sort of blocked out. Tenant farming would be like you're living on a farm, so you could, exchange housing and different things for working on this farm. And so it's really like the South is just very agricultural still, but they sort of have to find new labor sources rather than slavery. So the New South is in conjunction with industrialization, but it has to do with just like the South after slavery. I'm pretty sure. I'm sure industrialization is touching the South as well. But as far as I read about it, this is what it has to do. I mean, it's just like you can kind of see in this picture, like if I showed you this picture and asked you what year it was, some of you may have thought it was before slavery ended. It doesn't look all that different. And that's just because it's just sort of a new system to replace the old one. And then just same thing. New technology is increasing production, and that is decreasing prices. So this point was actually made twice in the key concepts. So definitely worth noting that like cause and effect of like when we produce more stuff, the prices of things go down because there's more available. As a result of all these things, we're going to see the Populist Party come into play. And the Populist Party is kind of, it starts with like agrarian activists. So these are farmers who are getting like the short end of the stick. And so they want more of a government role in economics, in labor. William Jennings Bryan would be like one of the most famous populists of this time, because he rises to power with his free silver, his like cross of gold speech. And his whole thing is, and I tried to read up on this, and I don't want to get too into the gold versus silver debates because we can get stuck in that for a while and it's not worth it. But basically it's like they had been on a gold standard, and he is concerned, this like cross of gold speech where he got all this attention. He wants there to be like what they call like bimetal, whatever it was called. They wanted to use both gold and silver to like free that up so that it would be easier to trade. And that's ultimately not what happens. We kind of stay on the gold standard, and then things get even more complicated after World War II. So we're not quite on the exact same standard that we used to be. But the whole premise is just about like standardizing money, so that if you have $10, what does that equal in if you go to Europe? How do you trade across currencies? You need some kind of standard. And so the debates were just around whether or not to keep just gold, to add silver, to move just to silver. And so he gives this speech, he gets all this credit, he runs for president, and he loses I think he loses to Teddy Roosevelt. Maybe it's McKinley right before. But he's like a name to know. All right, so let me know if I'm going too fast or if you have questions, okay? So I'm moving into 6.2. William Jennings Bryan like comes up so many different times, and he just doesn't really get like the best story, right? Okay, so key concept 6.2 is all about migrations. This is within the US, this like inter-migrations, and then our intra-state migrations, that would be like within, and then the interstate migrations, that would be to the US. And so the cities, like we talked about, the cities in the north are really attracting migrants, and they had been before. Like the old migration was Western Europe. That would be your, Irish, your Italians, your Germans, your British. In this time period, it shifts to Eastern Europe, and to Asia. And so in this time, in these like 50 years, there's a lot going on in Eastern Europe and in Asia. Like in Russia, the peasants are freed, the serfs are freed. And so as you're freed, now you have opportunity. And so there will be people who pick up and move. There are several different like pogroms of Jews that are persecuted in Eastern Europe in this time, and they have to pick up and move. And so there's reasons to leave Eastern Europe. There is some instability, some violence, some lack of opportunity for people. And then same thing in Asia. This is the same time period of there's a lot at like the Qing dynasty doesn't last for much longer than this time period. So there's quite a bit of turmoil going on, different rebellions, opium is an issue. And so there's a lot of reasons to leave China. And so there's a lot of people coming in. And then also from the South, after slavery ends, there's a lot of reason to leave the South because you have a continued oppression for African Americans in the South. And so they go to the North in hopes of like a better environment, a better life. And so there's push and pull reasons for why this happens. But a lot of people will move. Yeah, that's exactly. Well, yeah, the Great Migration is, I think it goes, that specifically even goes way further than this too. It's like, it includes like the 20s, 30s, 40s, especially where like people are, when they go to like LA and stuff. But there is a lot of movement happening in this time period as well. So as a result, you start to see these ethnic enclaves. That's your like Chinatowns, your Little Italy. I pulled this map. I found this map on Reddit, actually. I think it's a current map of New York. And you can see each little, it's kind of weird how they do this, but each little building is representing the like little, right? So you've got a little Bangladesh, little China, little Ecuador, little Germany. Like you've got all these different subsets of cultures because you have people, if you're moving to New York City from another country, you're most likely to go to a neighborhood where you might know someone or someone who knows someone kind of thing. And you're going to like stay with your people, right? Like you don't know the language. So you want to be around people who speak your language. You want to be around, similar food, similar traditions. And so all these little ethnic enclaves pop up because of this. And so this is just an example of today. There's a lot of them today. And these are kind of not totally starting in this time period. There were like little Italies, but this is going to really increase because of all the migrants that are coming in. And then a quick note about assimilation versus acculturation. So assimilation is just where your culture is just sort of absorbed and into the larger culture. So let's say you're Italian, or from this time period, let's say you're Polish, you're Jewish, you're from Poland, you move to New York City in this time period, and you become more American, and you just kind of give up the things that mattered to you. You stop speaking, Yiddish, you stop speaking the language of your home, you stop cooking the food of your home, and you just sort of like adapt, right? Like that would be assimilation. When you retain your culture, but you also share it with the larger culture. So, you continue speaking your language, or you build a restaurant around your food and you are selling it in the new place. That would be more of like acculturation, because you're not totally absorbed in, you're sharing what you have. And there's like, I don't know, it goes back and forth. So like you take some of the American culture and you give some of your culture. That makes sense. And then because of all of this, there's increased services for immigrants, because obviously it's really hard to move to a new country. You have nothing. You maybe came from a place where you didn't have anything to begin with, and now you have even less. And so there are some systems in place. Jane Addams is your like number one girl here. She builds Hull House in Chicago. This is an example. There are other ones in other cities, other people doing this as well. But just services that you can go to learn English, to help get a job, the simple things like, what do you need? Their basic needs, and they will kind of help you integrate into society. There's those new littles. So another thing that we're going to see in this time period is just a general increased access to education, which also promotes migration, right? Like the more schools and colleges and public education that we have, the more opportunity there is for people, because public education doesn't exist in all places. Wasn't it more middle-class women helping with integration? Yes, absolutely. So that would be your like Jane Addams. She's kind of the like poster woman for that. So increased access to education will also increase the middle class, because the middle class is mostly educated, not super wealthy, but they have the skills. They're a skilled workforce generally. And so with all of that, with education also comes more consumerism, because all those people theoretically have enough money to spend on things. So they're buying more. People are just in general, you see more advertising, more marketing, more just like people buying stuff. So that's a change in this time period. More people, more education. Obviously there's a lot of change in this time period, but that's a big one. Okay, so in terms of within the US, why is there more Western migration in this time period? Part of it is the transcontinental railroads are finished. And so the railroads, like, it's a lot easier to go across the US on a train than it is on a freaking wagon, right? Like, it's better as soon as that transportation is possible, it's a lot better for people. And then plus like the discovery of different resources, the gold rush is a little bit before this time period, but it continues. There's more of them that kind of spring up where there's reason to go west and to try to get your, riches, to try to find them. And then there was just government policies that promoted that would incentivize people to move west, to settle, to, build. And what we're going to see is all these like boom towns on the railroads where people kind of stop along the way. Cow towns where there was people, these are the cowboys. These are people that made a lot of money with like herding cattle, and there would be specific towns set up in their path, and they would those towns become bigger cities. And just like a lot of opportunities in the West, so just reason to go. The cities become very crowded, very, you could quickly run out, even though there's a lot of opportunities in cities. You might be in New York City and just be like, honestly, let's just go. Are there any famous examples of those types of cities? Off the top of my head, I don't know exactly a city that would be a boomtown city. However, like my guess is that something like cities in like Oklahoma and Nebraska that just are kind of in the middle, right? Like if you look at a map of the railroad that connects, one side to the other, there's going to be cities that are kind of on that route that will become much larger cities. Yeah, in Nevada, there's a lot of these like ghost towns that used to be those like boom towns that aren't really existing anymore. So if you drive like today from Reno to Vegas, you pass through a lot of these like ghost towns that you could tell used to be legit. Like people would go there for mining purposes, and now are just like nothing. Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah. All right. So here's an example. Like when you drive through Nevada, like I said, you kind of see places that almost look like this. It's really bizarre. It's like they're just left. Yeah. So that's kind of what it looks like. So, right, San Francisco is for sure mining. Yeah, that's a good, duh. I should have thought of that one. I'm trying to think of like other ones, but whatever. So as people are moving west, there's more competition for land and for resources. So some of the things we mentioned before, Sand Creek is a massacre of Native Americans. The Battle of Wounded Knee, that's like Custer's last stand. This is really like, this time period is really the end of Native American traditions as they were. Like this is kind of it. There are a few last tribes in the Great Plains, in the Northwest that were existing up until this time, like the Nez Perce, like the Apaches. And this is kind of it for them. They fight it out until they just can't anymore. And so Chief Joseph is a good example of that, of finally surrendering. They had kind of tried to settle up into Canada, the Nez Perce, and they were really trying to like continue on. But they just, it just sort of comes down to sign this treaty and maybe your people can stay alive or don't, and we'll kill you. We won't let you live the same life that you have. And they just sort of get cornered. And so Geronimo, Chief Joseph, this is it for them. This is kind of the end of this story. And they end up, the Native Americans kind of get absorbed into reservations, or are forced to assimilate into American life. I think that's the next thing here. Oh, here they are. Chief Joseph is the younger looking one. Geronimo is the older looking one. I think in this time period too, Sitting Bull ends up in a circus. It's so messed up what happens to these men. They really, really they give their life to trying to preserve their tradition, their culture, their history. And this is like a sad ending for them because they're just unable to do it. At this point, the U.S. government is much stronger, much more powerful, and they're just unable to come up against them. And so they sort of have to surrender. So, right. So some of what you're seeing is the assimilation of Native Americans. So like the Carlisle Indian School, here's an example. So they would take Native Americans and Americanize them and make them, Westernize them, right? Cut their hair, make them wear clothes that would assimilate them more. And so this is a good example of assimilation because you're not seeing them retain their culture, right? If they were able to retain their traditions in some aspect, this would be more acculturation, but this is assimilation because they're not. They're really asked to just sort of stop with your traditions and take on the clothes, the language, everything about being American. So this is what happens to the Native Americans. They're either forced to live on reservations and or forced to go to schools like this where they lose all of their traditional culture. So moving into this last key concept, 6.3, this like the culture of the Gilded Age. So there, like we kind of talked about social Darwinism before and the white man's burden. And these are two like theories that are driving legislation in this time period. But there's like a general like xenophobia that's happening, right? This is like the fear of foreigners. And so the Chinese Exclusion Act is something that we'll see in 1882. This is where we literally banned all immigration from China. So this is like the wall of 1882, right? Like actually I found this. Oh no, I didn't find that one. I found one political cartoon that had a wall around the US and it like said like no China. And it just straight up like banned all immigration from China until it wasn't until 1924 that they are allowed back, but at a very small quota, because they used quotas after this time period. So there weren't that many Chinese immigrants in between 1882 and 1924. And then it's not until I don't think like 1960s that this is totally taken away. So just to like, one more ridiculous thing the US did. So like here's another political cartoon. So you can see, you have the stereotypical like Chinese man being literally kicked out, right? It's like it's like you're not allowed here. The way that they like make this, you can see like the sun in the back is very, I don't know. Okay, so then this is, I think, almost at the end of this. So the last things that we're going to see is just like this gospel of wealth. So the idea is that businesses have the moral obligation to help the poor, that all this big money, all these big businesses should be spending money on helping people. And so you do see the Carnegie Public Library built. A lot of different universities are built in this time from these super rich people like Carnegie, like Stanford, like Vanderbilt. And so this is how they are putting their money back into society. Social gospel is just like another idea here. It's very similar. It's just about like you having everyone has an obligation to charity to help others. So like the YMCA is a Christian organization. That's how it began. I think it's like Young Men's Christian Association. And the YWCA would be for women. And it's an example of a religious organization meant to help the community. Hull House would be another example. So there was a lot of connections between religious organizations and charities in helping communities that are low income or immigrants or just lacking resources for whatever reason. So this is sort of the like culture of the Gilded Age. It's like there's so much money for some people, you should use it for good, right? That's the like push. And then there's so little money for other people. It's just the gap between rich and poor just continues to widen. And I mean, today it's even wider than it was then. So it just doesn't get any better. What do I have here? All right. So there's just like continued debates over, we kind of started talking about laissez-faire, and that's the general like economic policy of this time period, which is why big business rise. But throughout the time period, people are constantly debating whether or not government should have a more active role in business. And by the end of this time period, there are several legislations that pass that allow government to control business more. One of those would be the Pendleton Civil Service Act. This is where it used to be that your political affiliation would be the reason why you are given a federal job. So like you could get elected, an elected official, you could have helped them win, and then you would get a job because of that. That's like the spoils system. But this ends that. So this is just like it's not about your politics. It's about what you can do. It's your merit. And in fact, I think today it's like illegal. If you work for the federal government, you can't like contribute money to political campaigns. So that's an example of like a continued like way that we've tried to divide that. The Sherman Antitrust Act is going to help start breaking up the trusts. It's not until Teddy Roosevelt that we really get more of the trust busting happening, because this act passes, but the enforcement of it isn't there as much as it should be. Feminism is ramping up. So obviously in the next time period, pretty early on, we'll see the suffrage happen for women. And so the first wave of feminism is continuing in this time period. People like Jane Addams, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, Carrie Catt. The rise of like co-ed colleges is happening. That's kind of the push here. So there's going to be more women who are educated, more women going to college, and that will just lead to more leaders for when like the push for suffrage in the early 20th century really happens. And so this is just a continuation. And then finally, the like racial segregation that is continuing. So the really is between Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois that are sort of the two sides of what happens. Plessy versus Ferguson is a really important Supreme Court case that happens in this time period. And this is what literally upholds the separate but equal system. So all of the segregation that we see in the 20th century is constitutional because of Plessy versus Ferguson, because the Supreme Court rules that, as long as the two institutions are equal, they can be separate, right? And then what strikes that down in the 50s is Brown versus Board, because they then say these two things are not equal, therefore it's unconstitutional. So at this time period, though, they're saying it's cool if you have two water fountains, two schools, two everything, as long as they're equal. And so that's a really important case. But the difference between Booker T and W.E.B. Du Bois is that Booker T. Washington felt like the Black people didn't have to challenge Jim Crow directly. They didn't have to challenge segregation, that they could get their education, they could build up, businesses, black-owned businesses, and find progress through those things, and sort of like play the system, be in the system. Don't fight the system, be in the system and do well within that. Whereas W.E.B. Du Bois was the opposite. He's just like, no, we need full civil rights. We need more political representation. This system is not built for us. Therefore, we will never be fully successful in the system. We have to fight it, right? So it's just like fight it versus play it. That's the basic argument here. And actually, I was watching MSNBC this morning, and I saw Reverend Al Sharpton was debating with this one Black Trump supporter, and actually what they were just yelling at each other the whole time. But really what their fight came down to was this. The guy who was the Trump supporter was sort of the Booker T idea of like, I made it, I did things, I've succeeded, I've created a business, I'm running for office. He's sort of in the system and making use of it, making it work for him. Whereas Al Sharpton was saying, you only did those things because legislation allowed you to. We have to fight the system in order to create those opportunities. And that was literally the fight on the news today. And they obviously weren't citing these guys. If they were, that would have been awesome. But that's kind of what they were arguing about. So just because these two guys are, it's like 100 years ago, these debates happen every single day. This is a constant debate of fight the system or leave it as is and do as good as you can within it. So I think that's, yeah. All right. So you guys got questions about period 6? It's definitely a lot of conceptual stuff. There are like several terms to know for sure of like different legislations and people and events. But where is this posted? Okay, so this video will be posted inside the community. I haven't been posting the PowerPoints. I probably should. The too long didn't read for 6.1 is basically rich people get rich and keep getting rich. And that's about it. It's like the rich people just continue to gain power. That's your too long didn't read. And then there's just like a lot of reasons of why. And then what happens because of that. That's pretty much it. It's like 6.1 is like the rich get rich. 6.2 is like there's more people in the US, so there's just more stuff going on. And 6.3 is like the culture of those things. Because the rich get rich, how do people feel about it? Because there's more people, how do people feel about it? It's like how do people react. I would guess that the period ends in 1898 because of the Spanish-American War. I think it's just like the maybe, I mean, yeah, I think that's definitely why it is. And I think the like modern, like the 20th century doesn't really start in 1900, right? Like it's almost like the Spanish-American War kind of fits in with the narrative of the early 20th century. So it fits better with that than with this. Because I think the next chapter, the next part goes right into, you know, like the beginnings of the 20th century and progressivism and trust busting and all of that fits really well starting in 1898. And so it kind of like, it's sort of the rise of the Roosevelts. There's kind of the like dividing line. Any other questions about period 6? I don't know if this is broad, but what revolution happened during this period again? Revolution? You mean like in another country? And Jasper, period 7 is just a lot. It's like, it's both world wars. I think it's 1898 to 1945. So it's just a lot. In terms of other countries in this time period, Russia frees the serfs. And what else is happening? Russia frees the serfs. There are some rebellions happening in China. It's not quite a revolution yet, but yeah, there's just quite a bit of stuff happening in the world in this time period. A lot of like shifts about to happen. Yeah, period seven's a lot, so we'll need some time to go over all of that for sure. I might even split it up. It's not that it's the most important one. It's just a lot of stuff. I mean, it's just like as soon as you get to the 20th century in any of these classes, it just like really ramps up because things are just so much more interconnected that there's just more happening. So, you know, when you think about like period 3, it's like nothing compared to that. That's awesome that you're reading it through the whole thing. Yeah, you might need to read a little bit more. Yeah, I mean, with period 7, but I also think if you have some knowledge of world history, it can get a little easier in the 20th century because some of the larger events that are happening, you've already studied. So, like theoretically, right? Like the world wars, like the Cold War. And then it's just about knowing what was happening in the US as a result of those things. Luckily for you, 20th century is my jam. And that's what I really focused on in college is US 20th century history. So I can explain 20th century history all day. So that's where I'm going to like really shine. So the rest of the stuff I'm not as strong. I'm kind of learning some stuff as I go. Like I can explain some of this stuff, but not as much as I can explain the world wars, the Cold War. Cold War I know a lot about. And the like social movements of the 60s and 70s. I'll be able to explain those really well. So that's good. This stuff is like, this is giving me like flashbacks to that horrible college class I was telling you about, the economic history class that I did not do very well in. So, you know, what are you going to do? Yeah, period 9 is just like 1980 to now. Although there was an entire DBQ on period 9 like 2 years ago. So not totally useless. You can't really count out any time period. You just have to like just focus on the most important pieces and do them all that way. That's your best bet. Okay. So really quick, you guys, I sent out this http:// I sent out this survey. If you haven't taken it already, if you could, that would be really helpful for me. Basically what's happening is that I'm going to be spending the summer trying to build out this app, and I'm trying to gather as much data as I can from students in order to build something that you guys actually want and that other students really want. And so I'm kind of like incentivizing you guys to share that link with as many other students as you can. So if they put in your email as their referral code, you'll be kind of entered to win. So I'm going to be choosing at random 2 emails in that referral code column. And I'm going to be giving away, you'll get to choose either a full hour of tutoring with me, like just you and me will hop on Skype and I can really explain out anything that you need to know, or a $75 Amazon gift card. So you can choose one or the other. So if you want to win one of those two things, refer your friends to do this. Any AP student can do this. They don't have to be APUSH, but you could have your whole class take it and they can all put in your referral code and then you're entered to win 30 times. So that's kind of awesome. So if you guys can do that for me, that would be really great. And any other questions before we end for the night? I'll give you a second. Oh, well, it's my night. I'm all the way in Maine. I wonder if the timing is like not, yeah. Yeah, it's like 9 o'clock here. So they started here because it's the end of the Civil War. Cool. All right, so you guys good? Ugh, I wish. I feel like I missed my whole day. It's all dark now. All right. Cool. So if you guys have any questions, hit me up. And tomorrow I'm gonna do a practice DBQ to show you how to get all the points on the DBQ. Sweet. All right. So share that survey, please. You can click that link. I emailed it to you so you have it, and please send that out to your friends so that I can get more data from students so I can, I can guess what you want, but I'm not going to build the best thing unless I actually hear what you want. So, word. All right, I'll see you guys later. Bye.